It began on a night when the world felt unusually quiet, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. The stars looked sharper, brighter, almost watchful, like distant eyes waiting for someone to notice them. Dr. Adil Rahman had never believed in signs or miracles. He believed in data, measurements, logic, everything that could be written on a board or proved in a lab. But that night, standing alone on the rooftop of the International Research Observatory, he felt something he had never expected to feel, an unsettling sense that the universe was about to reveal something he wasn't prepared for. Adil had dedicated his entire life to science. He was known for his groundbreaking work in astrophysics, especially his research on dark matter and cosmic patterns. To him, the universe wasn't mysterious, it was a giant puzzle that simply needed time and patience to decode. But lately, every new discovery in the data was raising more questions than answers, and each question felt like it was pulling him somewhere deeper, somewhere he wasn't sure he wanted to go. For months, Adil and his small team had been tracking a strange signal hidden inside cosmic radiation. At first, they assumed it was a glitch, just noise, interference, maybe even a machine error. But as the weeks passed, the pattern grew clearer. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It almost responded. Like something out there was trying to communicate through the fabric of space itself. Every reading pointed toward an impossible conclusion, one that challenged everything science understood about the universe. Yet Adil kept pushing, driven by the need to find the truth, even if it shattered everything he believed in. His team consisted of only 3 people. Zara, a computer scientist with a sharp mind and a calm personality, someone who believed science and spirituality could coexist. Imran, a young researcher who questioned everything but hid his fears behind humor, and Dr. Morgan Ellis, visiting from the United States, an expert in quantum signals. Together, they had spent endless nights staring at screens, testing theories, and arguing over possibilities. None of them wanted to say it out loud, but the same thought lived at the back of each mind. What if this wasn't just a signal? What if it was a message? The keyword message became something they avoided in discussions because it carried weight. It implied intention. It implied intelligence. It implied something, or someone, far beyond what science was ready to accept. The more the team investigated, the stranger things became. Equipment that had never malfunctioned suddenly behaved unpredictably. Sensors tuned too deep into the signal would overload. Data logs rewrote themselves or displayed symbols that didn't belong to any human or known cosmic language. Zara believed they weren't errors but clues. Adil refused to admit it, though a part of him quietly feared she was right. One evening, after working for nearly 16 hours straight, Adil decided to run one more simulation. He fed the latest readings into the system, expecting nothing more than the same repeating pattern. But something changed. As the data streamed across the screen, the signal suddenly aligned into a perfect sequence, clean, stable, unmistakably intentional. Adil stared at it, frozen. For a moment he actually forgot to breathe. The pattern looked like a form of symmetry that no natural cosmic structure had ever produced. It was too precise, too ordered. It looked designed. Zara walked into the room and stopped when she saw Adil's expression. Before she could ask, he stepped aside, letting her see the screen. Her eyes widened. She didn't speak, but he could tell she understood exactly what he was thinking. Imran and Dr. Morgan rushed in moments later after hearing the sudden silence in the lab. All 4 stood there in a moment that felt like they were standing at the edge of something enormous, something that could rewrite humanity's place in the universe. Adil wanted to speak, but every word felt too small. He finally whispered the only thing his mind could form: "This shouldn't be possible." Morgan leaned closer to the screen, his voice trembling. "If this is real, then we're looking at an intelligence older than anything we've ever imagined." The room filled with a strange mix of excitement and fear. They knew they had to investigate further, but the weight of what they were dealing with started sinking in. The discovery wouldn't just change science, it would change belief, history, philosophy, even faith. The idea that science and spirituality were separate suddenly felt outdated. This wasn't just about galaxies and particles anymore. It was about purpose, design, and maybe even meaning. For the first time in his career, Adil felt the boundary between science and the concept of God blur. He didn't believe in miracles, yet the universe was showing him something that felt exactly like one. He remembered his childhood, when his mother used to tell him that everything in the universe had a creator, a higher design behind every star and atom. He used to smile politely and run back to his books. Now those old words echoed in his mind with new weight. The team decided to amplify the signal, to trace its source and decode whatever it was trying to show them. But the deeper they went, the stranger the readings became. It felt as if the signal was guiding them, adjusting itself, responding to their changes. Science had always taught Adil that the universe didn't care about humans, didn't react, didn't answer questions. But this signal behaved differently. It felt aware. As hours passed, the lights in the observatory flickered. Machines hummed with an unusual intensity. Adil felt a slight vibration in the floor, as if the building itself was reacting to the signal. Zara checked the systems, but everything looked normal. Imran tried to joke about it, but even he couldn't hide his unease. Then the unexpected happened. The screen flashed white. The signal surged, stronger than anything they had recorded before. The entire observatory went silent for a second. A heavy, breathless silence that made the air feel thick. And then on the screen a new pattern formed. It wasn't random. It wasn't symmetrical like before. It looked like a symbol. Adil didn't recognize it, but something about it felt ancient, meaningful, as if it carried thousands of years of knowledge inside its lines. Adil whispered, "What is that?" No one answered. No one could. Because deep inside they all felt the same chilling realization. Whatever intelligence sent that symbol wasn't just showing them the universe. It was showing them something about themselves. Something humanity had forgotten. Something science had once dismissed. Before they could analyze it, the system shut down on its own. The screens went black. The symbol vanished. And the observatory lights flickered once more, then stabilized, leaving the team standing in the darkened room, shaken, confused, and holding on to the same terrifying question. Had they just discovered proof of a higher power? Or was something far greater, and far more mysterious, trying to reach them? And as Adil looked at the blank screen, one thought refused to leave his mind. What if science had finally found God, but the universe wasn't ready for the answer? For a long moment, no one moved. The blank screens felt heavier than any data they had ever seen, as if the darkness itself was holding a secret they weren't supposed to unlock. Adil tried restarting the main console, but it didn't respond. Zara checked the backup systems only to find them frozen. It was impossible. These machines were built to survive power failures, storms, even electromagnetic interference. They weren't supposed to collapse because of a simple signal. Unless, it wasn't simple at all. Morgan rubbed his forehead, pacing slowly. This isn't just a malfunction. Something reacted to us. Something intelligent. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. Imran finally broke the silence. Guys, can we just accept that maybe we're dealing with something way above our pay grade? Adil looked at him sharply, not because he disagreed but because it echoed his own fear. He walked to the large window overlooking the open sky. The stars still shone brightly, undisturbed, innocent. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, an ancient consciousness had just opened its eyes the moment their instruments aligned with its signal. Zara gently placed a hand on Adil's shoulder. "Whatever we saw, it wasn't meant to scare us," she said softly. "Maybe it's guiding us. Maybe the universe is more connected than we think." Adil nodded, though he wasn't sure he believed that. For the first time in his scientific career he felt small, not because the universe was big, but because something unseen had just reminded him that humanity might not be the only one searching for answers. When the systems finally rebooted after nearly 10 minutes, the signal graph flickered back to life. But it wasn't the same. The pattern was gone. The symbol had vanished. The readings returned to the old random noise, as if the event had never happened. Zara sat down, eyes fixed on the screen. "It's hiding again." Morgan frowned. "Or it's waiting." Adil couldn't ignore the shift inside him. He had spent decades proving that the universe followed laws, clear, predictable, measurable. And yet the symbol they saw felt deliberate, like a whisper from something unseen. Something that existed beyond equations and theories. He took a deep breath and turned to the team. "We need to track every piece of data from the moment the symbol appeared. No matter how small. Even tiny fluctuations might mean something." They agreed, and for the next several hours, the room filled with quiet typing, steady beeping, and an unspoken tension that hung between them. Every time one of them found a clue, even the smallest anomaly, they paused, exchanged nervous looks, and then dug deeper. The more they searched, the stranger the picture became. The signal had changed frequency right before the symbol formed. Not gradually but instantly, as if switching channels. It wasn't random. It was intentional, like someone turning a dial to speak more clearly. The data also showed a brief spike in energy, far too concentrated to be natural. It resembled a controlled pulse, something that required immense intelligence or power. Imran leaned back in his chair, eyes wide. If this was a message, what was it trying to tell us? No one had an answer. As dawn approached, a soft golden light began to spill into the observatory, painting long shadows across the equipment. The exhaustion hit them all at once. Zara stretched her arms, Morgan closed his laptop, and Imran walked toward the coffee machine like a defeated soldier. Only Adil remained standing, staring at the graph on the main screen. For a moment he remembered a quiet evening from his childhood. His father had once told him, "There are questions science can't answer yet, but that doesn't mean truth doesn't exist. Maybe we just haven't learned the right language." Back then, Adil ignored those words. But today they felt painfully relevant. Eventually the team took a break, leaving Adil alone in the room. He sat down, rubbing his eyes, trying to think clearly. One part of him wanted to dismiss everything as coincidence. Another part, the part he spent his life trying to silence, whispered that the symbol wasn't an accident. Something had reached out and they had touched it. He reopened the data logs one more time, scanning for anything out of place. And that's when he noticed it. A small timestamp. A tiny signature. Something the others hadn't seen. The system labeled it as unregistered external input. Adil's heart skipped. External input. It meant something had interacted with their equipment. Not from the lab, not from Earth, not from anything human-made. It was faint, almost erased, but it confirmed one thing. The signal wasn't just received. It had responded. He immediately called the others back into the room. They crowded around the screen as Adil pointed at the logs, his voice steady but urgent. Zara covered her mouth, stunned. Morgan's eyes widened in disbelief. Imran whispered, "No way, that's impossible." But it wasn't impossible. It happened. Something out there knew they were listening. And then, before they could analyze the log further, the lights flickered again, but this time only once, like a quiet tap. The signal graph began to rise slowly, forming a steady wave. Not strong, not urgent. Almost gentle. Adil froze. Zara whispered, "It's coming back." The pattern grew clearer, delicate, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Not a human heartbeat, but something alive in its own way. Morgan slowly stepped closer to the screen. "It's not showing a symbol this time." "Then what is it?" Imran asked, voice barely a whisper. Adil felt a chill travel down his spine. "It's waiting," he said. "It wants us to make the next move." The observatory fell silent as the wave pulsed softly, patiently, like an invitation. Adil realized they weren't just observing the universe anymore. They were part of a conversation. One that could change everything humanity believed about creation, existence, and the possibility that science and faith were never meant to be separate. But the question that now weighed on all of them was simple, and terrifying. If they answered the signal, what would answer back? And more importantly, were they ready for the truth it carried? The soft, pulsing signal stayed on the screen like a heartbeat that didn't belong to any living thing they knew, yet somehow felt alive. Adil didn't move for a long time. He just watched the repeating wave rise and fall in perfect rhythm, as if the universe itself had placed its finger on the observatory's glass and was quietly knocking. He felt something inside him shift, something he didn't know how to describe. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was a strange blend of both, like standing at the edge of a cliff and trying to decide whether to step back or look down. Zara was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not random. It's communicating. But why like this?" Morgan leaned over the console, studying the wave closely. "Maybe this is its simplest form. Maybe this is a greeting." Imran crossed his arms and tried to act relaxed, but his foot was tapping nervously. A greeting from what, exactly? A star? A galaxy? Something else? Adil didn't answer. He knew that guessing too soon could lead them into wild ideas. But deep inside he couldn't ignore how deliberate the signal felt. It wasn't just noise, wasn't cosmic radiation, wasn't any form of interference. It felt structured, intentional. It responded once, then waited. Now it pulsed slowly, patiently, as if giving them time to understand. He took a deep breath and pulled up the historical data they had collected over the past months. The team gathered around him. By comparing the new pattern with the earlier recordings, something became clear. The signal had always been there, hidden deeply within cosmic background noise. But it never reacted until they ran the amplification sequence 2 days ago. Almost as if it had been waiting for someone to notice it. Someone to listen. Zara gently touched the screen. "It feels old, like it's been traveling for thousands of years." Morgan nodded. "Maybe longer. If this came from beyond our galaxy, the light alone would take millions of years to reach us. The signal could have been sent before humans even existed." That thought hung in the air like a cold wind. Imran broke the silence again. "So whatever sent it, is probably gone by now?" Adil looked at him. Or it's still out there. Waiting. Watching. Imran swallowed hard. Yeah, comforting. They continued analyzing the rhythm. It wasn't language, not in the human sense. But it wasn't meaningless. It repeated at regular intervals, almost like a key, a code, or a starting point. Something about it reminded Adil of a heartbeat. Not because it sounded like one, but because it felt like one. Steady, patient, alive. He walked to the far side of the observatory and stared again at the sky. The stars looked different now, not because they had changed, but because he had. Each star seemed like a window. Each dark patch seemed like a doorway. And somewhere out there, something had reached across unimaginable distance to tap on their world. Adil's thoughts drifted back years into his past. He remembered his university days, when he argued with one of his philosophy teachers about science and belief. Back then he insisted that the universe didn't care about purpose. It just existed. Cause and effect. Nothing more. But the teacher told him gently, sometimes the universe speaks in ways science hasn't learned to recognize yet. Adil had forgotten that conversation. Now it haunted him. Zara walked over and stood beside him. You're thinking about what it could be, aren't you? He nodded. I'm thinking about what it means. Do you think it's something divine? She asked carefully. He didn't answer for a long time. He didn't want to say yes. He didn't want to say no. He simply said, I think the universe is bigger than we thought. Zara smiled faintly. It always has been. We're just catching up. They returned to the team, and together they decided to study the source direction again. The observatory had the equipment to approximate where signals originated from, but usually not with perfect accuracy. Even then, the readings they had earlier were strange, shifting coordinates that didn't match any known astronomical object. Adil reran the triangulation with the new data. The system calculated for almost a full minute before displaying a slowly rotating 3D map. A red marker blinked on the edge of the model, near a cluster of faint stars. Morgan frowned. That region is empty. No planets. No radio sources. No known objects. Adil zoomed in. The red dot shifted slightly with each zoom level, as if uncertain, as if the signal didn't originate from one fixed point but from a region, maybe even from outside the mapped boundaries of their instruments. Zara whispered, it's coming from somewhere we can't see. Imran said, it's coming from nowhere. Adil took a deep breath. Or from somewhere we don't understand yet. He saved the coordinates, even though the system refused to lock them in fully. Whatever was out there was either moving or it existed in a way human tools weren't built to measure. That only deepened the mystery. Hours passed as they worked. The sun outside rose higher, filling the observatory with warm light that contrasted sharply with the cold, technical glow of their screens. Coffee cups piled on the desk. Bags formed under their eyes. But none of them wanted to leave. They were sitting in the middle of something historic. Maybe the most important discovery humanity had ever encountered. Eventually, Imran rubbed his eyes and asked the question circling everyone's minds. So what do we do now? Do we respond to it? Adil stared at him. Responding felt like crossing a line. A line between observation and communication. A line between science and something resembling belief. If they sent out a reply, they were admitting this was a message. They were engaging with something they didn't understand. It could be harmless. Could be dangerous. Or it could be something that changed everything humanity believed about the universe. Morgan shook his head. We don't even know what it is. Responding blindly is reckless. Zara disagreed. Not responding might be worse. What if it thinks we can't understand? What if it stops communicating? Imran sighed. Okay, but how do you say, hello, to something that doesn't speak any language we know? Everyone looked at Adil. They always did when a decision mattered. He didn't want to admit it, but he felt responsible, like the universe had dialed their number and he was the one holding the phone. He sat down and studied the signal again. The wave pulsed steadily, almost encouragingly. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just waiting. He whispered to himself, why us? He didn't expect an answer. But part of him wondered if the universe had chosen them for a reason. Maybe their instruments aligned at the right moment. Maybe their curiosity drew the signal in. Or maybe, in some mysterious way, they were meant to find it. He opened a document and began to draft a possible reply. Something simple, something that mirrored the rhythm, the steady pulse. Not a message. Just a presence. A sign of acknowledgement. Zara leaned in. If you send that, everything changes. Adil nodded. Everything already changed. But before he could transmit anything, the signal on the screen suddenly fluctuated. The heartbeat-like rhythm faltered, dropped, then reappeared, slower, softer, as if the source was weakening or drifting away. Zara gasped. It's fading. Adil's hands froze above the keyboard. Morgan rushed to the monitors. It's losing intensity. Whatever sent it, it's pulling back. Imran whispered, maybe it's waiting for us. Or maybe it's leaving. For the first time since the symbol appeared, panic rushed through Adil's chest. He felt like something precious, something ancient, something miraculous, was slipping away. Something that connected science with faith, logic with wonder. He looked at the diminishing pulse and realized something terrifying. If they didn't choose now, the choice might be taken from them. And as the signal continued to fade, one question echoed in every mind. Were they about to lose the first conversation humanity ever had with the universe, before it even truly began? The signal kept fading, each pulse growing weaker, like a voice calling from far away and losing strength with every second. The team gathered around the screen, silently watching the slow decline. No one dared to speak at first. Every small blip that dipped lower felt like a countdown to something none of them were ready to face. Adil's chest tightened as the rhythm weakened. He couldn't explain why, but it felt personal, like something had reached out to them and now it was slipping away because they hesitated. Zara finally broke the silence. If we don't respond now, we might never get another chance. Morgan looked conflicted, torn between caution and curiosity. Or we could make things worse. What if responding changes something we can't control? Imran looked between them, unusually serious. What if not responding changes things too? Adil felt the weight of their words. Both choices carried risk and neither had any guarantees. He took a step closer to the screen, watching the faint pulse. It felt like a plea. Not desperate, but deliberate, like something waiting at a doorway hoping someone would answer before it had to move on. He turned to the others. Before we do anything, we need to understand what this really is. We're shooting in the dark. Morgan nodded. Agreed. We need to analyze every angle first. Zara looked frustrated, but she didn't argue. Instead, she returned to her station, digging deeper into the frequency patterns. Imran started cross-checking all previous readings, searching for connections they might have missed. Morgan adjusted the equipment sensitivity, trying to track the source more accurately. The work became frantic, as if the urgency in the room could somehow hold the signal in place. In the midst of all this, Adil opened the cabinet in the back of the room and pulled out old notebooks, the kind he rarely used. They were filled with sketches of cosmic structures, theories he never published, and thoughts he once considered too vague for formal science. But now, those rough ideas seemed relevant. He flipped through pages of cosmic symmetry notes and diagrams that once made little sense. Suddenly, one page caught his eye, a pattern he drew years ago, after observing an anomaly in radiation distribution. It wasn't identical to the symbol they saw earlier, but it carried a similar structure. He stared at it, uneasy. He'd forgotten why he drew it in the first place. But it had always felt intentional, like something written into the universe's fabric. Now it felt connected. Zara walked over, noticing his expression. What is that? Something I saw years ago, he said quietly. I didn't understand it then. I barely do now. She studied the drawing carefully. It looks like the symbol we saw, but older somehow. Adil nodded slowly. Or maybe the symbol is part of something larger. Something we've been seeing in pieces for years without realizing it. Morgan overheard them and came closer. If this pattern has existed in the data before, then the signal didn't just start talking now. It's been leaving breadcrumbs. Imran shook his head from across the room. Breadcrumbs for who? Humanity? Or anyone who could detect it? Adil stared at the page again. Maybe not breadcrumbs. Maybe a map. A soft hum came from the console and the team hurried back to the main screen. The signal intensity dipped sharply, then stabilized for a moment. It didn't return to full strength, but it stopped fading long enough for them to breathe again. Zara whispered, "It's trying to hold on." Adil leaned closer. "We need to understand why it's weakening. Could the source be moving? Losing energy?" Morgan pointed to the screen. "Look at the frequency shift. It's drifting. And not by accident," Zara added. "It looks like repositioning. As if it's adjusting itself." Imran slowly looked up. "Adjusting to us?" They all went still. Adil felt a chill behind his ribs. The idea was impossible by normal rules of physics. Yet nothing about this signal was normal anymore. Morgan ran another calculation. The drift pattern isn't random. It's following our last adjustment from earlier. Zara's eyes widened. "It's matching our calibration?" Adil whispered, "It's learning." They exchanged glances, a mix of awe and fear. If the signal was learning from their actions, it meant the intelligence behind it could analyze and adapt to human-made systems, even from an unknown distance. Adil felt pressure building in his chest again. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a distant echo of something ancient. It was present. Where? Responding in real time. He rubbed his temples. We need more context. There has to be something in past cosmic readings, old observatory logs, any data that suggests this isn't the first time the universe has shown signs of intelligence. Zara nodded and began pulling old archives. Morgan accessed global scientific databases, looking for anything similar recorded by other space observatories. Imran focused on the equipment itself, trying to figure out if the signal was modifying their instruments or if they were simply detecting something far more complex than expected. Minutes passed, then an hour. And then Zara found something. Adil, you need to see this. He rushed to her station. She pointed at a years-old log from a distant observatory in South America. A brief anomaly had been detected, just a spike of energy, nothing clear. But the timestamp showed a strange fluctuation in background radiation, one that had the same rhythmic spacing as the current pulse. Adil's heart pounded. This was years before we detected anything. Zara nodded. And here, another one in Europe. And one in Japan. All tiny. All ignored. Morgan leaned in. So the signal has been trying to reach multiple observatories worldwide? Imran frowned. Or it's been passing by Earth for a long time, and nobody was listening the right way. Adil felt something dawning inside him. Something big. It's not just targeting us. It's sweeping across the planet in intervals. We just happened to be the first to align our instruments in a way that responded to it. Zara whispered, so it found us. That thought shook them all. If the signal was sweeping across Earth like a searchlight, then the symbol they saw earlier wasn't random. It wasn't a glitch. It was recognition, an acknowledgement that someone finally noticed. Morgan rubbed his forehead. If this is a search, what is it searching for? Adil had no answer. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't just science anymore. It was crossing into a territory where physics, philosophy, and belief collided. As they continued digging, more questions surfaced. Could the intelligence behind the signal exist outside of spacetime as they understood it? Was it ancient? Was it something natural they had misinterpreted? Or was it something humanity had been sensing for generations without knowing how to recognize it? The deeper they looked, the more every old mystery, cosmic alignments, unexplained patterns, unsolved anomalies, felt connected. Almost like small whispers leading to this moment. And then something unexpected happened. The pulse on the screen flashed once. Sure. Bright. Strong. Then it returned to its weak rhythm. Zara startled. What was that? Morgan quickly scanned it. It wasn't a random spike. It was emphasis. Adil stared at the screen with a sinking realization. That wasn't just a signal. He turned to the team, voice low and steady. That was a knock. The room fell silent. They didn't know what it meant. They didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was clear. Whatever intelligence was behind that signal was becoming more active. More direct. And it was waiting for them to answer. But as the next pulse flickered weaker than before, one terrifying question grew louder inside Adil's mind. What if they waited too long, and whatever was reaching out finally gave up? The storm clouds that had gathered over the facility earlier now pressed against the night like a heavy curtain, and the silence inside the underground lab felt almost unnatural. Dr. Ayaan stood near the central console, staring at the data pulsing across the screens. The patterns were no longer random. They formed shapes that almost felt like thoughts trying to take form. Every new reading only tightened the tension in the room. It was as if the universe itself was trying to speak, trying to break through the thin veil separating logic from something far greater. Evelyn paced behind him, arms wrapped around herself despite the warm air circulating through the room. She kept glancing at the reinforced glass window behind which the spherical chamber hummed softly. Inside it, the quantum resonance engine glowed with an eerie, shifting light, responding to signals that no machine on Earth should have been able to detect. She whispered that maybe they had gone too far, maybe this experiment wasn't just detecting cosmic noise, it was listening to something alive. Ayaan didn't respond. He couldn't. The truth was beginning to scare him too. Outside the lab, down the dim hallway, Dr. Rayyan was having his own battle. His mind raced back to the mysterious message that had appeared on his screen earlier that evening. It wasn't data. It wasn't code. It was a sentence, short, simple, and impossibly direct, written in a language he didn't recognize but somehow understood. He hadn't told the others. Not yet. The weight of it pressed against his conscience, but he knew revealing it before understanding it could break the team's focus. Still, the message replayed in his mind like a soft whisper he couldn't silence. Meanwhile, the outside world was beginning to change in subtle ways. Across cities nearby, power grids experienced unexplained surges. Radios crackled with faint sounds no technician could trace. Even satellites began to detect bursts of energy resembling signals but lacking any known pattern. Media outlets were picking up bits of information, asking questions scientists weren't ready to answer. Something was building, something too big to ignore. And the facility, unknowingly, was at the center of it. Back in the lab, the resonance engine suddenly flickered. Evelyn jumped, and Ayaan hurried to the console, trying to stabilize the readings. But instead of calming, the engine responded with stronger pulses of light, like a heartbeat growing louder. Ayaan's hands shook as he adjusted the controls. He recognized the pattern emerging. It was the same one they had traced earlier, the same signature that seemed too intentional to be an accident. The keywords they had been working with, cosmic intelligence, unexplained signals, quantum consciousness, swirled in his mind like pieces of a puzzle that were rearranging on their own. A distant rumble echoed through the underground tunnel, a low vibration that made the floor tremble. Rayyan rushed into the lab, breathless, eyes wide with something close to fear. He said the outer sensors had detected a sudden wave of electromagnetic energy heading directly toward their location. It wasn't from a star, a planet, or any physical body. It was coming from somewhere beyond their mapped universe. The energy wasn't destructive, but it was powerful enough to affect every instrument in the facility. Evelyn stepped closer to the glass chamber, staring at the growing brightness inside. She asked Ayaan whether something was responding to them or calling out to them. Her voice cracked. The thought that the universe might not be silent anymore was overwhelming. Ayaan didn't deny it, and that alone was enough to send a chill through everyone in the room. The hum grew louder. Screens flickered. The lights dimmed and surged again. For a moment, the engine glowed so brightly that the entire lab lit up like a sunrise underground. A shape seemed to form within the sphere. Nothing solid, nothing recognizable, but enough to make each of them step back in disbelief. Rayyan whispered under his breath that maybe this wasn't an experiment anymore. Maybe it was a meeting. A sudden alarm blared, cutting through the air. The energy wave had reached the facility. The walls vibrated with a strange resonance, and the chamber's glow pulsed faster, like it was reacting, matching, answering. Ayaan shouted for everyone to hold their positions, unsure whether to shut the system down or let it continue. But the engine was no longer under their control. Whatever was on the other side had taken over the signal. And then, just as the tension hit its peak, the glow inside the chamber condensed into a single point of blinding light. The sensors screamed. The air thickened with static. Every sound, every vibration, every heartbeat in the room merged into one overwhelming moment where it felt like the universe itself had paused. Something was about to emerge. Something that could explain everything, or destroy everything they believed about science, faith, and existence. And as the light widened and the chamber began to crackle with impossible energy, none of them knew whether they were witnessing a discovery, or the beginning of something far more terrifying. The blinding point of light inside the chamber stretched outward like a living thing, bending the air around it. Ayaan shielded his eyes, but he couldn't look away. The energy wasn't exploding, it was unfolding, like something was trying to step through a door that wasn't meant to open. Evelyn stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the console as the vibrations grew sharper, humming through their bones. Rayyan reached for the emergency shutdown, but the system rejected every command with a piercing electronic tone that almost sounded like a warning. Then, without any build-up, the light collapsed into itself, silent, sudden, and absolute. The room plunged into darkness. For a moment, the only sound was their own heavy breathing. Ayaan's voice trembled as he called out to confirm everyone was okay. Evelyn whispered a shaky yes. Rayyan's answer came late, as if he was distracted by something else in the dark. The backup lights flickered to life. The chamber stood intact, no longer glowing, but the center of it was no longer empty. A faint shimmer floated inside, like heat rising from a road but colder, sharper, almost intelligent in the way it moved. The three of them froze, unsure whether it was safe to even breathe near it. Ayaan took a slow step forward, voice steady but strained. He said the shimmer wasn't a solid form, it was data. Patterns. A message so dense and complex that it was taking physical shape. Evelyn disagreed, insisting that whatever it was felt alive, almost aware of them. Rayyan, still staring, murmured that it wasn't the real twist, that the bigger problem was happening outside. Evelyn turned sharply, confused. Rayyan finally admitted the truth he had been hiding. The energy wave hadn't just reached their location. It had spread across multiple regions simultaneously. Entire communication networks were picking up fragments of the same signal. Airports, research stations, satellites, even weather systems were responding to it. The world was no longer watching in curiosity, it was reacting in real time to something it didn't understand. And governments had already started reaching out to the facility demanding answers they didn't have. Ayaan's stomach tightened. Their discovery was no longer contained. The unexplained signals and cosmic intelligence keywords they had been quietly researching were now trending globally, raising panic and fascination in equal measure. If they didn't control the situation soon, they risked creating global chaos. Before he could respond, the shimmer inside the chamber moved, just slightly but enough to make Evelyn gasp. It stretched in a direction that wasn't up, down, left, or right. It shifted into an angle that shouldn't exist, like dimensions were folding around it. Ayaan realized with horror that the engine had done more than detect something. It had opened a connection. And now something on the other side was pushing through. But before they could react, the facility's main lights surged back on at full power. The sudden brightness hurt their eyes, but the real shock was the series of alerts flashing across every screen. The system showed another incoming wave, stronger, closer, and unlike the first one. This wasn't just energy anymore. It carried structure, organization, intent. Something was sending a second response, but this time it wasn't subtle. Evelyn's voice cracked as she asked what would happen if the wave interacted with the shimmering presence already inside the chamber. Rayyan didn't want to guess. Ayaan clenched his jaw, knowing the answer none of them wanted to say out loud. Something catastrophic might occur if two unknown forces collided inside an unstable quantum field. As the alert countdown began ticking down on the screen, the shimmer inside the chamber suddenly expanded, almost as if it sensed what was coming. The air around it bent, warping the reflection of the glass. Rayyan stepped back toward the door, but the moment he did, the facility unexpectedly locked down. Every door sealed shut with a loud metallic click, trapping them inside with something they couldn't understand. Ayaan shouted at the console, demanding the system to release the doors, but the interface displayed a line of text that froze him mid-sentence. It wasn't an error code. It wasn't a malfunction. It was a sentence written in the same impossible language they had seen before, brief, haunting, and forming with chilling clarity. Evelyn whispered the translation they all somehow understood at the same time. They are not coming alone. The countdown hit 0. The ground trembled. The lights dimmed again. And the second wave struck, stronger, sharper, resonating deep beneath the earth as the chamber filled with the kind of light that suggested the real conflict hadn't begun, but was about to. The second wave hit with a force that felt like the entire building shifted a few inches off its foundation. Ayaan grabbed the railing to steady himself as the chamber filled with a blinding light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Evelyn covered her ears even though there was no sound, only a pressure, a kind of silent weight that pushed against their thoughts. Rayyan shouted something, but his voice was swallowed by the brightness expanding from the center of the room. The shimmering presence inside the chamber stretched upward as though reacting to the new arrival. It no longer looked like just data or energy, it was forming something clearer, sharper, almost like a silhouette trying to find its shape. The air around it twisted into spirals, bending at angles that made the room feel like it was tilting. Ayaan felt his pulse racing, but he forced himself to stay focused. This was the moment they had been moving toward, whether they were ready or not. He reached for the manual override on the wall. Even if the system had taken on a mind of its own, the old mechanical failsafe still worked. Or so he hoped. As he slammed his palm against the release latch, the chamber doors unlocked with a loud metallic thud. The lights flickered, then steadied. The shimmering figure tightened, no longer expanding but contracting as if bracing itself. Or preparing. Evelyn grabbed Ayaan's arm and pointed at the screens. The incoming wave wasn't an attack, it was a transmission. Symbols flashed across the monitors, aligning into repeating sequences, almost like a language finally making itself understood. Rayyan stared, stunned, recognizing the patterns. This was the same signature they had found in cosmic background radiation, in deep space anomalies, in unexplained data fragments the world had ignored for years. All these signals were part of one system, or one mind. Ayaan felt something shift inside him, a realization that was both terrifying and reassuring. The chamber wasn't a battlefield. It was a meeting place. The shimmering presence inside the chamber finally took form, soft, fluid, not entirely human but familiar enough to feel comforting rather than threatening. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't an alien life form. It was an echo, a projection of something far beyond physical reality. Ayaan stepped forward, feeling a strange calm settle over him. The figure turned toward them, or at least it seemed like it did. Then, for the first time, a voice rang through the chamber. It wasn't heard through ears but through the mind, gentle and resonant like a memory you somehow recognized even though you knew you had never heard it before. "You opened a door without knowing what lies behind it," the voice said. "Yet your intention was curiosity, not conquest. That is why we came." Evelyn's eyes welled with tears, not from fear but from the overwhelming weight of the moment. Rayyan exhaled shakily, his earlier panic melting into awe. Ayaan stepped closer, fighting the instinct to doubt what he was experiencing. He asked the only question his mind could form. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer with a name. Instead, it spoke of something older than stars, a consciousness that existed outside time, observing the universe grow and break and rebuild. It explained that humanity had reached a point where their technology brushed against something deeper, a layer of reality where thought and creation met. A place many ancient civilizations had tried to understand in their own ways. Some called it the divine. Some called it energy. Some called it truth. The keywords Ayaan had been obsessed with: cosmic intelligence, universal consciousness, the connection between science and spirituality, suddenly made perfect sense. Science hadn't found God. Science had simply discovered a doorway to something humanity had been sensing for centuries. The figure told them the waves were not threats. They were responses. Humanity had asked a question through technology, and the universe had answered. The second wave finally settled, leaving the chamber calm and bright. The figure began to fade, its form dissolving like mist in sunlight. Before disappearing completely, it delivered one final message directed not at their minds but their hearts. "Knowledge is powerful, but understanding is peace. Do not fear what you do not yet comprehend." Then the chamber went still. The shimmer disappeared. The screens cleared. The facility hummed softly like it always had, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. Rayyan let out a shaky laugh, overwhelmed but relieved. Evelyn wiped her face and whispered that the world would never believe what they saw. Ayaan nodded, but his thoughts were somewhere else. He felt lighter, as if a weight he didn't know he carried had finally been set down. Just as he turned to leave the chamber, the lights flickered one more time. A small thread of golden shimmer appeared briefly in the air, so faint he thought he imagined it. But then it traced a single word across the central monitor, glowing softly before fading away. Ayaan stepped closer, reading the word aloud in a quiet, uncertain voice. Again. Rayyan froze. Evelyn's breath caught. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was a promise. Or a warning. Something out there wasn't finished with them. The door they opened wasn't closed anymore. And whatever waited on the other side was coming back. Ayaan walked slowly to the central console, running his fingers over the controls. Everything seemed functional now, as if the chaos had never occurred. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. He turned to the team. "We have proof now, not proof of a deity in the human sense, but proof that intelligence permeates the universe in ways we've only theorized. Something out there is aware, observing, and responding to us." Evelyn nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "It wasn't hostile. It wanted us to understand, not to fear. It gave us knowledge, guidance, and yet it didn't reveal everything. That's what makes it real. Alive." Rayyan, still absorbing everything, shook his head in disbelief. All those anomalies, all those unexplained readings over the years, it wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. Humanity has been brushing against this presence for decades, maybe centuries. We just weren't paying attention in the right way. Ayaan walked slowly to the central console, running his fingers over the controls. Everything seemed functional now, as if the chaos had never occurred. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. He turned to the team. "We have proof now, not proof of a deity in the human sense, but proof that intelligence permeates the universe in ways we've only theorized. Something out there is aware, observing, and responding to us." Evelyn nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "It wasn't hostile. It wanted us to understand, not to fear. It gave us knowledge, guidance, and yet it didn't reveal everything. That's what makes it real. Alive." Rayyan, still absorbing everything, shook his head in disbelief. All those anomalies, all those unexplained readings over the years, it wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. Humanity has been brushing against this presence for decades, maybe centuries. We just weren't paying attention in the right way. The team spent the next hours cross-checking their data with global observatories. Every tiny anomaly that had been dismissed before now took on new significance. Cosmic radiation fluctuations, bursts of quantum energy, even long-forgotten signals from satellites, they all aligned in ways that suggested a conscious pattern. Keywords like cosmic intelligence, universal consciousness, and quantum awareness became more than abstract ideas. They were part of a system, a subtle architecture of the universe that humanity had only just begun to notice. Ayaan realized something critical. The facility, their instruments, even their timing, had aligned with the pattern not by chance but by readiness. The universe, or the consciousness behind it, had waited for beings capable of understanding and interpreting its signals responsibly. That explained the careful, patient rhythm of the first wave and the more urgent second wave. They hadn't been random pulses, they had been a test. Evelyn suggested documenting everything immediately, not just for their records but to prepare the world. Ayaan agreed, but cautioned that global exposure needed careful management. Humanity wasn't ready to confront the idea that intelligence existed outside their understanding of life or time. The team decided to release their findings gradually, framing it in scientific language while hinting at the extraordinary implications. While compiling the reports, Rayyan made another discovery. In the fading traces of the second wave, there were micropulses that suggested ongoing communication. The intelligence was still out there, still aware of them, still observing. It wasn't a one-time event. This wasn't a conclusion, it was an opening. The golden word again wasn't a threat. It was an invitation to continue learning, to continue exploring, to remain vigilant. Ayaan reflected on the personal journey each of them had undergone. They had begun as scientists chasing anomalies and ended as witnesses to something that transcended human understanding. The experience had blurred the line between faith and logic, between science and the divine. Every argument they had once had about the limits of knowledge now seemed trivial compared to the vastness of what they had encountered. Evelyn, looking out the observation window at the night sky, whispered, "The universe is alive in ways we've never measured. And somehow, it chose to show itself to us. That's a responsibility." She turned back to them. "We can't just study it. We have to respect it, understand it, and share it wisely." Rayyan nodded, adding, "And we have to be patient. Intelligence this old, this vast, operates on scales we can barely comprehend. Humanity's time is fast, impulsive. But the universe, it waits, it watches, and it reacts when we're ready." Ayaan felt a mix of humility and awe. They had solved one part of the mystery, but the larger truth remained. Knowledge of the universe's intelligence wasn't just about discovery, it was about alignment, about readiness, about understanding that the cosmos is a participant in its own unfolding. Humanity had found a doorway to something eternal, but the real journey would take lifetimes. In the following days, the team worked on preparing their data for publication while keeping some details private. They established a secure communication channel with other observatories worldwide to continue monitoring the signals. Keywords like cosmic pattern recognition, quantum communication, and universal intelligence became central to their ongoing research. They were determined to follow the clues, but carefully, ensuring that the world wouldn't panic before understanding what they were witnessing. Despite the careful work, the golden message remained in their minds. The word again implied recurrence, continuity. It meant that the universe's intelligence wasn't done with humanity, or them personally. Ayaan realized that this encounter had changed everything, not just about science but about how humans saw themselves in the cosmos. They weren't the only thinkers, the only observers, the only sentient beings capable of curiosity. But they were among the first to be trusted with awareness. Even as they concluded their immediate research, subtle signs persisted. Small fluctuations in quantum readings, whispers in the data, and fleeting patterns in cosmic background radiation reminded them that the intelligence was still present, still guiding, still patient. It was both comforting and humbling. The facility returned to routine operations, though the chamber remained sealed as a precaution. Visitors, journalists, and global officials began to hear rumors, but the team had already prepared an educational release, carefully framing their experience in a way that sparked curiosity rather than fear. Humanity was ready to learn, but only gradually. Months later, Ayaan sat alone in the observation room, staring at the night sky. Evelyn and Rayyan had joined him intermittently over the months, but he needed this moment of reflection. The stars were still watching, and the echoes of the golden message lingered in his mind. He felt a strange peace, knowing that science and consciousness were no longer separate. They were threads in the same tapestry, each influencing the other in subtle, profound ways. And then, as he watched the quiet sky, a soft shimmer appeared, almost imperceptible, on the horizon. A faint pulse mirrored the rhythm they had seen before. Ayaan's heart skipped. The universe wasn't finished. It was simply patient. He smiled faintly, knowing they had been entrusted with a glimpse into something eternal. And though the journey ahead would be long, filled with questions they might never fully answer, one truth was clear. Humanity had found a doorway to understanding the universe in ways science alone could never achieve. The world was changed, the team was changed, and Ayaan felt the deep, humbling weight of knowing that curiosity had led them not just to knowledge but to connection, with the cosmos, with consciousness, and with something far greater than themselves. The golden shimmer faded again, leaving the night calm, but the word again lingered quietly in their thoughts. A reminder that the story was far from over, and that the universe would always be waiting for those willing to listen. And with that, the observatory fell into silence, the stars shining steadily, as if the cosmos itself had exhaled, leaving humanity with the first true understanding that science and the divine could, perhaps, meet in ways they had only just begun to imagine.